So I was promising this alternative, and I'll get rid of the two handlers here at first. So the alternative I'm talking of are event listeners. Now, while this might sound similar to event handlers, it's a different thing in JavaScript. I'll first create two functions, and I'll name the first one listener1. That's a normal function here. And in this function, I'll say listener1, just log listener1 to the console, and then I'll quickly copy that function to create listener2. So these are my two listener functions, and now I want to add them as event listeners to my code. I can therefore take my button and use the add event listener method on it. Add event listener is a method available on each HTML element, and it does exactly what the name implies. It allows me to add an event listener to it. The first argument this method expects is the name of the event I want to listen to. Click, for example. So the name is equal to the name you saw in the event handler, but without the on at the beginning. Just the event name here. The second argument is a reference to the function I want to execute if this, listener fires, if this event is recognized. Listener1, for example, here. Notice that I don't have parentheses here. I don't want to execute the function right away. I just want to set up a link to the function. So now if I run this and click on click, what do you think we'll see? We see listener1. So this works. The cool thing is I can now also add another listener, listener2. If I click on run and I clear this, and now I click me, you see we see both listeners all the time, which of course is great. Now let's say we want to remove one listener after a certain amount of time. So I'm clearing this, and then I'll add a set timeout function here. And after 2 seconds, let's say, I want to execute the function I'm going to specify now. In this anonymous function here, I want to revoke one of the event listeners, remove one of the event listeners. Well, thankfully, I have the remove event listener method. Now you might expect that I simply pass the listener reference here, so the name of the function which I want to remove, and I'm done. But that is not the case. And why is it not the case? Well, the function which gets executed is not the only thing defining the event. The type of event is also important. Because imagine you were listening to another event here too, where you also execute listener1, but you're listening to the mouse enter event. Well, if you would remove event listeners only by function, then you would remove this listener from the click and mouse enter event. But maybe you don't want to do that, you want to remove it from the click and listener1 event. Therefore, remove event listener expects the same arguments as add event listener does. So I'll set up this to be a click event and then the listener I want to remove. Now if I click on run with JavaScript and then I click this button, you'll see listener 1 and 2, and then after a couple of seconds you see I only get listener 2, because now listener 1 was removed due to this timer being done.